Probably the last time we saw that Daniel was in contact with a king called Darius the Mede, who is not the emperor of the Persian Empire. He is a sub-king over Babylon. And it's Darius the Mede that brings about Daniel being thrown into the lion's den and issued the decree that we talked about yesterday. Daniel is given a vision by God concerning the following emperors of the empire. He is told about the next 4 emperors that would rule after Cyrus, and he's told that the 4th would be the richest of all. And the 4th, following Cyrus, was a guy by the name of Xerxes. And we'll come to him in a little while today. And we're told in Esther chapter 1 just how wealthy he was. Daniel's also given a prophecy at the time of Darius the Mede concerning almost 400 years of the future. And that's given for us in Daniel chapter 11. Jake?
Wasn't Xerxes the one who fought the Greeks?
Yes. And we'll talk about that when we get to him. Okay, this is just kind of showing you a little preview of what's coming up. We'll talk about these guys in a little more detail. So under Cyrus, the return to Judah begins to take place. Remember that there were 3 different deportations to Babylon that was conducted under Nebuchadnezzar. And then there are 3 returns that begin under Cyrus. We have here when these deportations took place versus Daniel and others in 606 BC. There's a second one, 10,000 taken, including Ezekiel, in 597 BC. And then the third trip that Nebuchadnezzar makes, he destroys Jerusalem and the temple and also deports people at that time. Then we find in 539 BC the fall of Babylon to the Persians under Cyrus. Cyrus then in 536 allows Jews to return to Jerusalem. And at that time Zerubbabel leads about 50,000 back to Jerusalem. You can see that reflected here. By 516, the temple is rebuilt under the urging of Haggai and Zechariah. And then we have the events that are recorded in the book of Esther taking place. Following that, we have Ezra and some others return to Jerusalem. And then finally, Nehemiah returns and the city walls are rebuilt. Now, much of this is looking ahead. We're going to cover more of this in detail as we go along and see where it fits in. First, the first return under Zerubbabel, and that's recorded for us in Ezra 1 through 6. At this time, the altar was built. That's the first thing they did, build an altar. Why? Because they wanted to be able to offer sacrifices to God right away. And so they did that. That took place in the 7th month, which would be equivalent to our September, October. Then they began building the temple itself by laying a foundation. Now let's take a brief pause here and review where we have been and some of where we're going. So we started out with Abraham entering Canaan, being called from what city? Ur. That wasn't very loud or enthusiastic. Let's try to pick up the pace here. Jacob moved his family to Egypt, following which of his sons?
Joseph.
Moses led the exodus out of Egypt into the promised land. Joshua took them in. Then we had the period of Judges, wherein everyone.
They rules right his own.
Okay. Anybody else know besides Jacob? Jacob. Jake? Is your name Jacob? Just Jake. Your parents just named you Jake? Okay. I was thinking of Jacob up here, and it just seemed like a natural thing to call you Jacob. All right, so the period of Judges, and then we have the United Kingdom established. Who's the first king? Saul. The rest of you guys don't know this? Who's the second king?
David.
Who's the third king?
Solomon.
Okay, getting a little better. The kingdom is divided after Solomon's death, not because he died, but why?
The taxes.
Taxes were raised. Israel eventually is judged by God because all their kings were evil. The whole nation fell away from the Lord, and so what country was sent in to bring judgment on? Assyria. And then Judah eventually is judged by God also through Babylon. Who was the leader of Babylon? Right. And so the fall of Judah, including the destruction of the temple, takes place. Now we're to the point where we're seeing Jews returning from exile to Judah, to Jerusalem. The temple is being rebuilt, and eventually we'll get to Ezra, Nehemiah, and Malachi as that progresses. All right, so they've begun to build the temple in Jerusalem. At that point, they encounter some economic and political struggle. And that is because Cyrus has died. Cyrus actually was killed in battle, and so his son, Cambyses II, became the emperor. Cambyses II is pictured here, the son of Cyrus the Great. And when he takes over, apparently it seemed like an opportune time for enemies of the Jews rebuilding the temple to write letters. So they wrote letters to Cambyses, basically accusing the Jews of wanting to build this so that they can revolt against the Persian government and so on, of course, which was not true. But Cambyses stopped the work on the temple. By the way, at the same time in Greece, there was a mathematician that you all know and love that was figuring out things with triangles and so on. His name is Pythagoras. You familiar with Pythagoras and Pythagorean theorem? Yeah. And so this is it's his time period when he's living. All right, so Cambyses II expands the empire even more. He goes over to Egypt and defeats Egypt, but he was not the kind, benevolent leader that his father was. He I've lost something here. This is really weird. I know I had some notes here about what happened, and it's not appearing. Oh, I have two sets of notes, and one has more stuff than the other. That's really weird. Let's see if this is the right set. Yes, okay. Yeah, there's some other things here I wanted to tell you about Cambyses. Cambyses was an opposite of his father. In fact, he killed his sister, Roxana, who also happened to be his wife. And he killed his son using an arrow. He buried 12 noble Persians alive. And remember Croesus, King Croesus, who gave us minted coins and also shaved them, debased them in some way? Well, he condemned Croesus to death. And then he changed his mind and then rejoiced that nobody had carried out the sentence after he had changed his mind. But he still punished the officials who had not executed him. Yeah, that's the kind of guy he was. So he's happy. Oh, I'm so glad you didn't kill him. Okay, now kill him now. So he went over to Egypt, defeated Egypt, and when he did, he ridiculed the Egyptian religion. Now remember, his father Cyrus had said, all religions everywhere, just practice however you want, live where you want, everything's cool, everybody has liberty. Not Cambyses II. He ridiculed them. He plunged his dagger derisively into the bull, revered by the Egyptians as the god Apis. He exhumed mummies. He pried into royal tombs. He profaned their temples, and he ordered their idols to be burned. Another thing he did, knowing how much they revered cats, when he claimed victory over the Egyptians in the Battle of Pelusium, he reportedly hurled cats into the faces of his defeated and cat-loving foes. So he threw cats at them. The comment here is, proof, if it ever was needed, that liking cats will only lead to terrible, terrible things, along with cat-shaped face wounds. So apparently the person who dug up this information was not a cat lover, like the Egyptians. Yes?
I heard, it's a little bit off topic, but it's about cats and Egyptians. Like,
Okay.
if they went into battle against the Egyptians, the other side brought cats, and the Egyptians didn't want to hurt the cats because they worshipped the cats, and so the Egyptians lost.
Well, maybe that's what happened here. So afterwards, he just picked up the cats and started throwing them at them. Caden?
Why cats though?
Because the Egyptians worshipped cats. They thought cats were great. You see pictures of cats in a lot of hieroglyphics and so on. Okay. So anyway, that's the kind of guy Cambyses was. Then he moved over to Libya. Libya is just in this direction from Egypt, and he used camels in his conquering of Libya. He continued to go further, all the way over to Carthage, but he failed to take Carthage. Well, at this point, there was a person who seized the throne back in Persia, whose name was Smerdis, or sometimes he's named Galmata. And he claimed to be Cambyses' dead brother, Bardiya. Well, the thing is, Bardiya had been secretly murdered by Cambyses. So Cambyses hears that his dead brother has come back from the dead and is on the throne back in Persia. So he says, I better get back there because I know my brother's dead. I had him murdered myself. And so he goes. Well, on the way home, apparently having lost his sanity, Cambyses committed suicide. Well, the Egyptians, when they heard about that, felt that the Egyptian gods punished him for what he had done to all of them, all their gods in Egypt. All right, so now, because you've got a person who's not really related on the throne, claiming to be somebody, that throws the whole empire into civil war. And there's a guy that comes along that puts a stop to it, that begins to take control. He is a distant relative, probably a cousin of Cyrus, whose name is Darius Hystaspes. Here's another Darius. Only this Darius will become the emperor of the empire, and he will then be called Darius the Great. Darius saved the empire by assassinating this impostor and restoring law and order. He also had to subdue a revolt in Babylon, and after a long siege, he crucified 3,000 of its leading citizens. Well, Darius ordered work to continue on the temple, so they started working on the temple in Jerusalem again. He enlarged the borders of the empire from India all the way to West Africa, and from Arabia up to southern Russia. He also built roads and carried out sweeping legal and judicial reforms. So as bad as Cambyses was, Darius is the other way. Darius is a good administrator. He is setting things in order. He's getting it organized, and it's running like a well-oiled machine. In addition to those things, he instituted coinage. So he started minting coins and postage systems. They had a mail system in Persia. In fact, they had something similar to the Pony Express. They had mail carriers on horseback carrying the mail. He then built the city of Persepolis, which ranks today as a great building achievement. Here it is where it's located on a present-day map. Persepolis is in Iran, so it's doubtful any of you will want to go there and see it. You'll probably be accused of being an American spy or something. But here's a picture of some of the ruins of it. You can see it must have been a grand place. Religiously, he followed Zoroaster, or Zoroastrianism. Zoroaster taught that there were two spirits. One was the spirit of truth, and the other is the spirit of falsehood, and they were like two gods that were fighting it out over the universe. So it's sort of a form of dualism. I think we talked about them, for those of you who were in Bible Doctrine last year, we talked about that a little bit. But Darius was a good ruler. He became one of the wisest administrators in history. All right, so at this time, during his rule, that a guy comes and encourages the people to get back to work on the temple, as you have already read. This is when Zechariah then also is leading people back to work on the temple as well. And so that resumes, and they continue to build. And eventually, the temple was completed in 515. Now, Darius the Great decides to expand the empire even further. And so he decides to invade Greece. So ultimately in 490, although it's going to begin before that, the main invasion is going to take place in 490, where he crosses the Aegean Sea and tries to invade the mainland of Greece directly, as you can see on this map, with the Persian navy stopping off in these places and arriving there. But the initial attempt to cross the sea, in that attempt, Darius had 600 ships with 60,000 Persian crack cavalry and foot soldiers. And his aim is to get here and then come down to Athens and capture Athens and thereby subdue the Greek civilization. The first campaign was actually in 492, led by his captain Mardonius. And in that one, he was able to subject Thrace, which is up in here, and forced Macedon, or Macedon as they say it, which is over in here, to become fully subordinate client kingdom part of Persia. And they had been a vassal state of Persia as early as the late 6th century, but the control had kind of lapsed, and so Darius comes back in and says, okay, you guys are under control again here. But further progress was prevented of actually invading Greece when Mardonius' fleet was wrecked in a storm off the coast of Mount Athos. Well, the next year, having demonstrated his intentions already, the Greeks knew that he was coming for them. So he sent ambassadors to all the areas of Greece and demanded that they simply submit to him. Guys know I've got this huge army and navy. Let's just forget about all the killing people and everything. Just go ahead and submit, and we won't even bother. Well, most of Greece did, except for Sparta and Athens, and they killed the ambassadors. Not exactly a way to win friends. And so Darius knows he's going to have to invade. So in 490, he attempts to conquer Athens, and part of it is he wants to punish them for aiding the Ionian Greek cities in their abortive revolt against the Persian overlords. The Ionian cities are along the coast here of Asia Minor. These are Greek people that came over here and settled, but they were under Persian control. Well, Athens had convinced them to go ahead and revolt against the Persians. Well, Persians didn't take too kindly to that, and so he wants to get back at Athens for having been involved in that attempted revolution. So he lands in the Bay of Marathon. He brings his ships here, lands his troops. They get off the boats, and as they arrive, there is a group of Athenians and Plataeans there to greet them, to prevent them from taking Athens. And this is called the Plain of Marathon. Here's a drawing of the Persians landing off their ships and then doing battle with the Greeks who are waiting for them. Unfortunately for Darius, his army was soundly defeated by the Greeks by a brilliant Greek general, Miltiades. After the battle, a runner is sent back to Athens to tell them of their victory. And as he arrived, he told them that we are victorious, and he dropped dead. In honor of him, then, they began running a race of the same distance that he ran from the plain of Marathon to Athens, which was a little over 26 miles. And so people today still run a marathon. Any of you ever run a marathon? Yeah? That's a long ways. I saw recently a man broke the record for a marathon. What, he wrote under 2 hours? But they're not allowing the record to stand because
People who like running fast.
there were people, they were what do you call it, pacers.
Yeah.
They were running with him. I guess you're not allowed to do that. So, but I can't imagine. It would take me 2 hours to go 1 mile, let alone 26. I don't know. All right. At the same time, you might be interested to know, in India, there's a guy promoting his ideas whose name is Gautama Buddha. This is when Buddhism starts at the same time. All right, so the results of the Battle of Marathon, you can see, first of all, how the Persians, and they called their troops immortals. Tells you how confident they were, right? And triremes are ships. So you can see the total they have versus the Athenians and the Plataeans. Mostly Athenians. They outnumber them by quite a bit. And yet, look at the losses. 192 Athenians, over 6,400 Persians killed. 7 ships captured. Now, they did lose Eritrea, which was enslaved and burned, and the city of Naxos was burned as well. But they were victorious at the Battle of Marathon. So as a result of the efforts of Darius, the Persian Empire goes all the way from here over to India, southern Russia, Asia Minor, area of Thrace, down to Egypt, to Ethiopia, but they haven't conquered Greece. But they've got more than any other empire before them. Any questions so far? Darius actually dies of old age. Unusual, right? And so his son, Xerxes, becomes king. Xerxes' mother is the daughter of Cyrus. So he has connections on both sides of his family, his father and mother, to the royal line. Now, in the Old Testament, you will find the name Xerxes. He has a different name in the Old Testament. There he is called Ahasuerus. 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 Now, Ahasuerus, we seem to go back and forth with the temperaments of the different emperors. Darius was, somewhat violent, I suppose you could say, but normally a good ruler. Xerxes is violent, he's very temperamental, and very lustful. He wants what he wants. At this time, Xerxes decides he's going to do what his father couldn't do. He's going to invade Greece, and he's going to be successful. Now, there's controversy over when this feast occurs exactly, whether it's before or after his invasion. I think it makes more sense to see it happening before, as a way to kind of rally the troops, get everybody together, and everybody on his side, everybody throughout the kingdom, throughout the empire, and they're going to support him in this effort against Greece. And so he has this fantastic feast attended by thousands of his kingdom officials coming from every one of the 127 provinces, stretching from India to Ethiopia. Now, you've maybe been to what you might call a tremendous feast or party. What's the longest party you've ever been to, or celebration?
Pretty much all day.
All day? Yeah, that's a pretty big party, right? If it's all day, usually people get tired and go home, whatever. Anybody, maybe you had a family reunion that lasted a couple days, whatever. All right, this feast that Xerxes is giving lasted 180 days. That's a long party. Put it in another perspective. How many months would that be?
Like
Six.
About 6 months. Can you imagine having a 6-month long party?
They get really, really fat.
They got really, really fat and really, really drunk, probably. I mean, they're eating and drinking every day. After a while, you think you get tired of it, but they kept going. And so I think what happens is, as he's trying to boost morale because he's planning to have this expedition against Greece, after 6 months, you start looking around for something to do. Okay, we've been eating and drinking all this time. What else? And somebody comes up with the idea for Xerxes to bring in his wife. Hey, bring it. Your wife's supposed to be so beautiful. Bring her in. Let us take a look at her. Her name is Queen Vashti. And so the king called for her to come in and parade her beauty before some of his important but half-drunk friends. The queen refused to display herself in this cheap manner, and so Xerxes became very angry. And he took the advice of his friends and deposed her, took her off the throne. Well, at least he didn't kill her, as far as I know. He just said, you're no longer queen. Now, the Talmud, which is Jewish writings, and Josephus, the Jewish historian, and Jewish commentators suggest that what was intended was for her to come into the feast with only her crown on. And that may have been the reason why she said, no, I'm not going to do that. And it would surprise me if that was the case. So, he needs a new queen. What's he do? He sponsors an empire-wide beauty contest to bring in beautiful women to see which one is going to be the next queen. This beauty contest lasted for 4 years, narrowing down from all the beautiful women, and finally he selects a replacement, and that replacement is Esther. Yes, Esther. Now, Esther is her Persian name that she took because she didn't want anybody to know that she was Jewish. It's a derivation of Ishtar. What was her Jewish name? Does anybody know? Her Jewish name, or Hebrew name, was Hadassah. But we all know her as Esther. All right, so Xerxes is planning to invade. So he brings his troops over to the crossing area, and he has 1.5 million men. That's hard to even imagine. And 300 ships. And he's going to cross what's called the Dardanelles here to go into Greece. Now, before they cross over, he has his whole army parade before him. He's sitting up on a throne of sorts, and they're all marching before him. You can imagine 1.5 million men, how long that would even take. And they're all dressed in their fine clothes, and they've got banners and all kinds of colors and stuff. And as they're going by, he starts to weep. And someone asked him, why are you weeping? This is what he said. Because I know all this military glory is but for a moment and will soon fade away forever. Because in much less than 100 years from now, every man present here today will have died, myself included. Oh, he really did show some perspective there, didn't he? But he went on. He tried to send his ships across, and a violent storm came up, and he lost. One source says 400 ships. Now, another source said he only had 300 to begin with, so I'm not sure how that works out. Different sources have different numbers. But he lost a large number of his ships. He became so angry that he actually took his belt and beat the waves, or he instructed others to beat the waves as punishment for the sea acting against him. But then he moves to go across the area called the Hellespont, or Dardanelles, up here. It's a narrow area of water to cross as opposed to down in here. And he comes up with an ingenious way. With his ships, many of them being destroyed in the storm, he's got to think, how am I going to get all my troops and horses across? You know?
Yeah, he lined up the ships next to him and then the breach.
Yeah, exactly. He made a bridge out of his ships, put planks on top of them, and so he made himself a bridge over which they could all cross. Pretty ingenious idea. Here's another drawing of it. You can see he's got the ships lashed together with ropes, and then a bridge built on top of it. Because horses might get a little skittish walking on top of water, they don't really like being on water. So he also brought in dirt and put on top of the planks so that to the horses it seemed like they were just walking on ground. It's a pretty smart idea too. All right, so he's able to cross over into Greece up here. Started down here in Saltboth and Sardis, came up here, crossed over, and now he is making his way down, and he wants to attack, especially Athens, but the main cities here in Greece. In order to get there, though, he's got to go through this area called Thermopylae. There's a mountain pass here. Now, when I read about this for years, I thought a mountain pass was simply a narrow passage in between two mountains. I didn't realize until I was actually there that there's a mountain on one side and there's water on the other. So the pass is between the mountains and the water. And as the Persians are coming down, and the Greeks are here ready to meet them, they realize they can't defeat the Persians on their own. And so 300 Spartans under the leadership of Leonidas, the king of Sparta, volunteered to stay and hold off the Persians so the rest of the Greek army can escape and pick up some more soldiers as they proceed south. And so they do. The Spartans, because it's a narrow area, 300 men are able to hold off 1.5 million because not all 1.5 million can come at once. It's a narrow area. So if you've got 100 people, room for 100 people, only 100 Persians can come. And every 100 to come, they beat them back. And the next 100 come, they beat them back. And so they keep doing this. And they're being successful. But then there's a traitor that comes along and goes over to Xerxes and says, I know how you can defeat them. And he shows them a pathway, a trail up in the mountain to go around the pass and come around the other side. And so as the Spartans are fighting and they're holding off these Persians, there are other Persians that are going around, and now they're coming from behind. Now they're caught between, and they've got no chance. And every one of them dies there on that battlefield. But they have prevented the Persians from being able to go as quickly as they wanted down to Athens, especially. And it gives Athens a time to get ready. And so the idea is that they will proceed down to Athens, which the army does. They come down to Athens and they burn it. They capture some of these other cities along the way. But the people of Athens have all moved out to the island of Salamis. So he can't get at them. So now he needs his navy. So he sends his navy down, and they are ready. They're coming down here, and they're ready to attack. Not sure exactly what they should do. But at that point, a traitor comes over, or a seeming traitor comes over to Xerxes, and he's actually a double agent. He's pretending to be a traitor. He's actually feeding false information. And he tells Xerxes, look, the Athenian ships are all bottled up in here. If you just come in and attack, you've got them all right there. You'll be successful. Well, that's what the Athenians want him to do. Because they know out here where there's a lot of room, they have no chance against those huge Persian ships. But here in a little narrow area, now they've got a chance because those Persian ships can't maneuver very well. So that's what happens. Xerxes takes a spot up here, up on a mountain. He's looking down and watches the battle, and he sends his ships in. There's 3 lines. There's one line of Phoenicians, those great sailors. There's some Ionian Greeks that are on the Persian side, and then he's got an Egyptian contingent that sails down this way. All right, so all these huge ships are coming up here. They line up here to attack. Well, like I said, their big ships had a hard time maneuvering. The Athenian ships are smaller, and they're able to maneuver around and attack the larger ships, and they're being successful. They're sinking them. Xerxes is up here watching his navy falling apart. They're being destroyed before his very eyes, and they're able to be successful. So the Athenians having a victory here, Xerxes is very discouraged, and he ends up leaving. He just goes back home. He does leave 100,000 troops there, though, under the leadership of the command of General Mardonius. So Mardonius hangs around with these troops trying to regain what they had lost, trying to make further incursions. But a year later, he is defeated and killed in battle at the Battle of Plataea. And at this, the Persian Empire was dealt the final death blow. There's no more expansion into Greece. So Xerxes goes back home, and he throws another party. This time to try to take everybody's minds off of the defeat, and also to celebrate his marriage to Esther. And as a means of celebration, or as a celebratory act, he also lowers taxes throughout the province to help everybody forget about the big defeat. And we'll talk more next time about what happens with Xerxes and Esther. Any questions?